Hi, this is Pablo Spot. I'm George. On this episode, we are going to look at how containers help me achieve productivity. I'm going to show you how I use Python to generate infrastructure diagrams without having to install or set up anything on my machine to have a working Python environment. Let's start coding. So before we start looking into how I use Python for what I do, let me quickly show you how I set up Python on my machine in the past. Be mindful that the Mac operating system comes with a version of Python that's very old. So if I open my terminal and issue a command python -- version, mine is 2.7.16, which is pretty old. You should not be touching this version of Python because this comes with the operating system. If you've messed this up, you'll pretty much mess up your operating system. So to be able to install a higher version of Python, I use this tool called Virtualenv. So if I open my browser and start searching for installing Virtualenv on Mac, I'll be able to get several hits. I'm interested with this second web page in here. So if you open that on a new tab, you'll have several steps in there that you have to follow to install Python 3.8, some binaries that you need to set up your virtual environment, and the actual creation of the virtual environment. So you pretty much have a number of steps you have to go through before you can start working. With Docker containers, you are actually using generally a lightweight package that has everything you need. So the application, the runtime components, the libraries, and some other dependencies. So everything is pretty much cooked up for you. So Docker containers sort of runs like a virtual machine on top of your machine, but they are ephemeral. So if you decide to throw away the container once you're done, you can do that, and then you can recreate the same virtual environment from the Docker image later on. So let's start doing some actual work. Let's start looking at generating infrastructure diagrams using Python Docker containers. So first thing I would do is, especially if I'm working on a new image, Docker image, is to check for availability in Docker Hub. So if I open my browser and then go to hub.docker.com and then start searching for the image that I'm interested in this case Python, and then I have this list. I know that this is the official image for Python. So if I open that, what I also need to know is which versions of Python is associated to the latest image. So you see here it says Docker pull Python. If you don't provide any tags after Python, it will always pull the latest image available in the repository or in the hub. So what I would do is I would go search for latest. So that's latest, which means if I just run the command that's provided up there, it will give me a 3.9 version of Python. So if I go to my VS Code and I run docker pull Python, that will pull the latest image. You see it says using default tag latest, so it will pull latest into my local machine. So now if I run docker images, I have Python latest tag. So now that we have the Python latest image on our local machine, we are ready to create our own image that we will use to generate the infrastructure diagram. So in here, we first create our docker config file. And our image will be based off the Python image that we got from Docker Hub. And then we will need to install all the tools and modules that we need. So in here, I go apt get update, and then apt get install to install graph.viz. And then I do a cleanup at the end. Then what I need to do next is I need to install the Python module called diagrams. And I want this Docker image to be executable, so I'm going to set up an entry point and set that to Python. save the Docker config file, and then at this point we're actually ready to build our image. Docker build and context. I'm gonna tag my image as my diagrams. So that build is done. Let me have a look at what images we have now. Cool. So we've got Python and our custom diagram. So at this point, we're ready to set up our workspace for the diagrams that we need to generate. So in here, I'm going to create a new folder called diagrams. And then inside the diagrams, I'm going to start writing all the Python scripts that will generate the infrastructure diagram for me. So in here, I'm going to call this first file call it end-to-end infra.py. I'd suggest reading the documentation that diagrams has. They provide different classes that you can use when writing up your Python scripts per cloud provider. So for AWS, here's the list of classes that you can use per resource. I have an infrastructure script, Python script that I've already written for GCP that we can use in here. So if I pull that out, save it here. I want to change the file name to diagrams end-to-end infra. So that means when this runs, it will generate the diagram inside a diagrams directory. So remember, this is a Python script, and when we create the files by default, they don't have a execute permission. So if I go ls -l diagrams, they only have pretty much read permission. So we need to change that. We do chmod diagrams and we change everything. So if I check that again, now the file is executable. So what I need to do next is I go docker run -v. -v is pretty much mapping a local volume into a directory inside the container itself. So I'm going to map the diagrams directory on my machine into a /diagrams directory inside the container. So to be able to see how this is set up, let me override the entry point. Let me change that to interactive. Override the entry point to sh and get into the box. So my diagrams. So in here, I'm actually inside the container, and if I go to /diagrams and do an ls, you'll notice that this same file is the same file as what we have in here. So if I create a new file in here, call it test, and then from inside the container, I do an ls -l, test file is created in there. So it's basically a mapped volume inside the container. So let me exit from this container. If I cancel and then delete this file. So now to generate the diagram, I go docker run -v pwd diagrams, and then my image name, and then at the end I need to pass the location of the py file that I need to generate infrastructure for. So I go diagrams and to n-infra.py, run that, and once that's successful, you will see a PNG file that's generated inside the diagrams folder. So if I open that file, the infrastructure diagram will look like this. So it's an endpoint going to the web load balancer, and then you've got web servers, upload balancer, app servers, and then the database. That's it. That's all I did. So I didn't have to set up GrabFees on my machine. I didn't have to set up or install any Python modules. I don't have Python 3.9 on my machine. Everything's happening inside the container, which is pretty neat. So there you have it. First installment of how containers help me achieve productivity. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Send me some likes if you find this useful and subscribe to this channel. Remember, you learn more by doing. Until next time, see ya.